here with Robert Wenzel, publisher of the Economic Policy Journal, Target Liberty. You also have the EPJ Daily Alert, author of Private Property Society. I appreciate you taking the time talking to me today.
Hey, Mike, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So we're in some pretty unusual times, difficult times. I just wanted to get you on because you're one of the brightest economic minds I know of. To give an assessment of what you think is going on financially, and then kind of talk kids who are just getting out of college out, into some kind of game plan. So we just start with what you think is going on fiscally right now?
Okay, well, it's obviously a crazy time with this lockdown. It looks like different states will be opening up to different degrees over time. So I think that is going to give students a better opportunity to find jobs from right now where they must feel like there's no hope for them. So there is going to be some hope. And there's a strange economic situation going on right now with the Federal Reserve where they're printing a lot of money. And because they're printing a lot of money, there are going to be some sectors in the economy that are positively going to boom once the lockout is over. So students should really sort of keep an eye out for example, I can tell you on the negative side, probably cruise ship business is not somewhere you would want to go. Although, from what I understand, at discount rates, there are apparently cruise ship junkies that are signing up for travel in 2021. So who knows? But keep an eye out because there's going to be areas that are going to be absolutely booming. So it's not a situation where you should give up hope. There is going to be hope. You're going to have to wait a few more weeks, but once you're going to start watching the unemployment, the job notices on different websites as to where opportunities are, and soon you'll get a sense for where things are opening up and where you're going to have a chance. So that's number one. And the next thing I have to emphasize, and this is something that you should really carry on throughout your career, and that is persistence is so important. I would bet on somebody who's persistent over someone who's smarter, who has better skills almost any time. If you've got that persistence, eventually things are going to work out for you. So if you get turned down here or turned down there, it doesn't mean anything. You just keep on going. If you give up, nothing's going to happen for you. If you are persistent, something's going to break. Every time you adjust a little bit, and to every new one, when you learn something new, when you go on an interview, or how to tweak your resume, and that's all going to be a plus for you. So, and that's something you should take through your whole life. I see the people that are always successful, and there's people around me. I've seen people that are in different financial situations or financial businesses, and the really key to every one of them is persistence. Now, if you've got persistence and you have skill, then you're a Michael Jordan or LeBron James. You got it made. You can really take over the world. But persistence alone is, I can't overemphasize how important that is. Just don't give up. Keep on pushing. Try and figure out new angles and that sort of thing. Another thing that is important is networking. Now, people look at networking the wrong way. They think you start to network, in 2 weeks you're going to run into some guy who is going to hire you. That's not going to happen. Networking is more of a long-term situation. And what I tell people to do is you try and get into a network situation that's sort of the highest level network that you can get in at your level, whatever that is. Then you're going to be introduced to people, and you might get invited to this group or that group over time. Always be networking. That's something that also can help you throughout your career. And you really don't find enough of that kind of networking going on. But it's not something that's going to happen right away. It's going to happen over time, where where people get to know you and see you, and you tell them what you do, what you'd like to do, and things may open up for you. It could be even signing up with a gym. I mean, if there's not too big of a difference between a low price gym and the high price gym, I would recommend putting the money into the hyper. I can't tell you the people I've met at my gym that are extremely powerful people, and I know them very well. When the market was crashing a couple of weeks back, I mean, they were on the phone calling me, and this is only because I knew them at the gym, and they were asking me, what should we do, Bob? And at the time, Mike, as you know, I was telling people, I'm all in. I'm going in here. This is the time to do it. And so far, fingers crossed, it's worked out pretty well for us. But these are people. If I didn't go to this gym, I would have never met them. And that's the kind of thing you want. You want to expose yourself to where there are people that long term can help you, not necessarily next week or anything like that. Just over time, you're going to bump into them at the locker, see them all the time, and these relationships develop. And that's something, again, that should last you really, really throughout your career. Just do those kind of things and join other clubs where you think there's people that are valuable. And another thing I want to point out with regard to this is something called super networkers. Now, I don't really have a lot of time to do a lot of networking, so it's just here and there and that type of thing. But what I do is I'm very aware of people who are networking all the time, and they can be your best friend because they will hook you up. I mean, first of all, they like to network. So if you're talking to them, they love it, but they know everybody else, and they will put you in touch with this person, that person, and the other. So be aware of super networkers that are around you, because they can help you to a tremendous degree that over time you'll just say, wow, this guy, you run into situations that you would never run into if it wasn't for these super networkers. So that's another thing. So that's a start. More of a long-term plan, but the persistence is important right out of the gate. Networking should start as soon as possible, but keep both of them going for as long as possible.
You're speaking a lot of guys I talk to, wrestlers. I don't know how much you know about the sport, but they are some of the hardest working guys. So when you're out there, guys, persistent, work hard.
Yeah, I was just thinking that wrestlers must be those kind of guys. Yeah.
There's been several articles, written by Forbes, the best employee you could ever have as a wrestler, because they don't get upset when you correct them, and they want to. But let's move on. So we're talking the right language for these people. Average guy when he gets out of school, or girl, wrestler, they might be. We'll say they're younger than us, and maybe they're socializing a lot, and that's a priority. If you had a few extra dollars, I know you're all in. We've talked about it. What could you do for a small amount of money? I know generally people are paying for this advice, but just be generic.
Okay, just for you, Mike.
Yeah, just for me. Just can you give some people? I'm not saying specific recommendations, but what a difference it makes if you are financially responsible, or at least somewhat responsible, as a young person starting out versus when you're 50.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, that's a really, really good point. The first thing I say is that you should always live beneath your means, okay? I mean, if you were like living on the street, you would still somehow figure out a way to eat and all that kind of stuff. I mean, San Francisco here has homeless people all over the place. I don't know how they do it, but they're all eating. So whatever you can afford, you got to tuck away at least 10%. If you can afford, an apartment in a top building, maybe what you do is you start out in a secondary building and you save that money. You should always have anywhere from, at a minimum, 3 to 6 months worth of cash saved up for emergency. And part of that, half of that money should be invested in gold and silver coins, especially now, because I see the inflation. The Federal Reserve has increased the money supply by such an incredible amount, literally trillions of dollars, that the inflation on the other side of the lockdown is not going to be something that we've seen in a very, very long time. So people who just hold cash and keep it all in the bank are not going to be able to keep up with the inflation. Their money is going to be dwindling in value. But what's going to happen with gold and silver, as more and more people recognize, hey, the inflation is bad, I need to buy some gold and silver to protect my assets, there's going to be a rush into these. And the gold and silver is going to increase, who knows, 5 or 10 times faster than the inflation. So that's the place you want to be. You don't have to, go too crazy on it, but you should always be saving, always live under your means in saving, put some away as cash, put some away as gold and silver. And then if you've got stuff, additional money that you want to put in the stock market, I've got a simple portfolio where I say at this point, you put half in the stock market in one of the indexes, like the SPY index for example, its symbol is SPY. It's an ETF that mimics the key indicators in the stock market. So that's one thing you could buy. And then the other half you would put in a ETF, which is called an exchange traded fund, which buys stocks in gold stocks. And that the symbol on that is GDX. If you want to get a little more aggressive, you do the GDXJ. That's George David X-ray or George David X-ray John. And so you put half in SPY, which is Sam, Paul Yankee, and half in that, and that'll get you off to a good start in these crazy times that we have, and looks like they're going to continue.
Good advice. I appreciate the information about the specifics there. As people get older, there's different milestones generally. Maybe they get married. Maybe they start a family. Are there different ways to look at planning for your future financially that you have as far as milestones, or is that just an old kind of a way of looking at it?
It's important, but the real problem is now that the government is so erratic with what they're doing. I mean, look, if they've locked down a huge part of the economy right now, you don't know what they're going to do next. You don't know how much money they're going to print. So in the old days, it made a lot of sense to just sort of put money away and save for retirement, and that really made a lot of sense. But now you don't know which way the economy is going to go, whether they're going to pump it in a way the stock market's going to go up, whether they're going to stop somewhere down the road, and you're going to have some kind of crash. You have to be agile, and that's very, very difficult to do, especially if you're not trained in economics and investments the way I am. But what I would say is that diversity is important in terms of diversifying your portfolio. And you've got to have the cash, you've got to have the gold coins. Then when you're getting into the stock market, you keep some in the stocks and some in the gold stocks right now. And then what you can do is, instead of once you've got that base, I think you start poking around and you look for stocks that are potential big winners. There's an old book by what I would say any one of the books by Peter Lynch that talks about 10 baggers, and he explains how he gets them. So I would pick up one of the investment books of Peter Lynch, and he will tell you how to invest in stocks to look for and identify companies that are around you that you really understand. Don't buy something on a tip on some medical stock that you don't know anything about, and it's going to be a next cure for whatever. Buy companies that you like and and that's what Peter Lynch did. And of course, he was a very, very successful and famous money manager with that track record, and he talks about it freely in his book. Another book, I'll throw another one out, is by Ray Dirks, which was written probably about 1980, and it's called Heads You Win, Tails You Win. And in that book, again, he talks about how to look for investments. So you understand that kind of stuff. And then the other thing I've got to emphasize is you can't invest in something you get scared just because the price is going down, because prices are volatile in the stock market. And what you've got to do is what an even older investment advisor was a stockbroker by the name of Gerald Loeb, who wrote a book, The Battle for Stock Market Profits. And in that book, he talked about the ruling reason. So if you're buying, you bought a pizza stock, okay, I'm just making this up to make it simple, yep, because there's going to be a school opening up across the street, so that pizza shop is going to boom like crazy. Well, it doesn't matter if the stock is going up or down short term. The ruling reason is there's a school going up, and that place is going to explode. So as long as the ruling reason stays, if for some reason it changes and the school isn't going to be there anymore, then you can sell the stock. But if the ruling reason for whatever you buy, it doesn't matter what the price is in the short term. The lower it goes, the better off you are if the ruling reason stays intact.
Gotcha. Good advice. Now, other than going to the Economic Policy Journal and subscribing to your alert, are there other people that you listen to or watch that you think are dispensing reasonable financial advice these days?
That's really interesting. Mike, I can't think of anybody
Okay.
offhand. I mean, I can't. I mean, I have a very, very unique perspective because I look at it from both an investment perspective and from an economic perspective, where I understand the business cycle and things like that. So there are very, very few people that understand. I mean, I've really studied the business cycle, and as a matter of fact, I wrote a book. I was invited to speak before the Federal Reserve. They probably won't invite me back after the speech I gave, but that speech is included in a book I wrote called the Fed Flunks. And in that book, I discussed the different things the Fed does wrong and how they've created booms and busts and all that sort of thing. And I explain in there how I knew in real time that the financial crisis was coming before Ben Bernanke was then the Federal Reserve Chairman, knew it was coming. Two New York Federal Reserve economists, Bank of New York Federal Reserve economists, said there was no housing bubble, and I wrote a response to that. And that's, as a matter of fact, why they asked me to speak to them, because I clearly identified them as being wrong. I said they're going to be known as being as wrong about housing not being in a bubble as Irving Fisher in 1929 was wrong when he said stocks were at a new permanent plateau just before the stock market crashed. And what happened was they actually went around the country making a presentation of their view that there was no housing bubble and quoted me as an alternative perspective. And of course, they probably got a lot of laughs at that time, but they're not laughing anymore. So,
your revenge, best served cold.
Yeah, right.
I was wondering how that happened, because I became more aware of you during the last, the Great Recession,
right.
Building up to that and calling out the housing bubble and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Has anybody been beating down your door to get your opinion besides me and maybe a couple of other small, obscure journalists about what's going on now?
I wouldn't say the mainstream journalists generally don't call me. I mean, I can see they read my stuff, and occasionally, very curiously, within a couple of days after I write something, they sort of write something along similar lines. So I find that interesting. But more than that, hedge funds are paying. Let's say money managers of hedge funds are paying attention to me, and we're sort of negotiating to see what we can do there. But
interesting.
That's going to be a very, very interesting negotiation that I'm in right now.
You can't tell us who that is. Most likely. Yeah. Oh, so let's just say if you're a grown up, let's just say I'm 53, and I didn't get serious about my financial security until I was maybe, 10 years ago, 43, really started working hard and saving money and being a little more responsible. What can you tell somebody at this time where in the uncertain times, maybe they've not been as responsible or haven't had the opportunity to save money and invest? Is there something you would give different advice to an older person?
I would give the advice to everybody. I mean, as soon as possible, get disciplined.
Yeah.
Mentally, you've got to really think about living beneath your means. If you can, if you've got a income, let's just say you have an income of $100,000, you got to live like you have $80,000 and save part of that, and you have to diversify based on different scenarios of what could happen. That's the most important thing you can do, is live beneath your means, because then you're not going to get in trouble. The people that are going to get in trouble are the people that are spending every penny they have, and then something changes, and then they can't pay the rent, they can't buy food, whatever the case might be. And we're going into very, very volatile times. You don't really know how it's going to change, how it's going to develop. So the most important thing is do not spend all your money, whatever age you're at. The sooner you understand that and the sooner you develop that discipline, you really have to make sure that you apply it. The earlier, the better. I mean, when I was a young kid running around out there. I mean, I'm glad that I always maintained that discipline at a very, very early age, and it pays off for you in the long run. And part of that is also looking at the stocks I talked about that are the Peter Lynch style stocks, which have the potential to really go. And you just buy a few of those, just tuck them away. Don't get focused on just one, where if it works, you're gonna be a billionaire overnight. But if it doesn't, you're gonna be in trouble. Diversify amongst those where you think there's really, really good Peter Lynch style potential.
Just a side note, you wrestlers who are listening out there and former wrestlers, you guys cut a ton of weight. You should have a lot of discipline. So keep that in mind when you're following that living below your means advice. One last question. I've had a few friends who have been in and out and probably done the wrong strategy. We'll say they were in the market, they had a lot of money, and they weren't disciplined. They didn't know as much as they should. It was a tip here and there. Is there a way to cope with that anxiety of the market, whether you're in a good investment or bad investment? I mean, I guess knowing that you've done your research is the best way to quell that anxiety. But with the unusual time we're in, is there any other tricks that you use to just say, "I believe"?
I'll tell you that is really a very, very important question. It might be one of the most important questions that is asked about investments, and it's not properly understood. The most difficult thing to do is to emotionally adjust to what's going on in the markets. That's why I brought up that whole thing about the ruling reason and not paying attention to price. You have to be mentally disciplined and understand that price can go up or down short term, and it doesn't matter. You've got to understand why you're in that stock and what the ruling reason is that you believe will make the stock much higher down the road. It's an emotional game, and I'll tell you, almost everybody gets it wrong. They're always buying at the top. They're never buying at the bottom. And Mike, as you know in my alert, I mean, I'm fearless when it comes to buying against the trends. I mean, I've just done it my whole life. I'm sort of adjusted to that. I understand it very, very well. And that's what you got to do. You got to be fearless. And I'm sure there's some kind of similarity to what wrestling is. There's got to be a time when you can't be fearless. You really have to, go after the opponent or whatever it is, versus backing down at the wrong time. And the same thing happens in investments. When you know that all the information, all the logical data tells you this is going to work out and the price is low, that's when you buy, because that's when you're going to get the low prices. If you're buying only because the price is going up, you're going to get caught at the top. You got to completely reverse that thinking, and it's very, very difficult. And most people trade on emotions, and that's why they lose money.
Did you have to develop that muscle yourself, that mental muscle of rational thought, quelling any kind of anxiety, or is it something you were born with?
I don't think I was born with it, but for some very complicated reasons, I think I developed it at a very, very early age. And so I wasn't born with it.
Okay.
But it takes time. I mean, if someone's the older you are, probably the more difficult it will be to really, really adjust to that. You almost need you got to set your mind to paying attention to what the other part of your mind is thinking. You're thinking, okay, is this a logical part or is this emotion driving me? And you've got to really cut it and stop that emotion from interfering. And that is very, very difficult for most people. But I've been fortunate in that way, and it's worked for me. I mean, I stick with my ruling reasons. If I think I'm logically right, I don't care what anybody else is thinking, what the price is. If it's going down, it's a bargain for me.
Gotcha. Wanted to follow that up. Some kids who may be out of school for a few years. They've got, someone they're in a relationship with. What are your thoughts on real estate? I know we're coming into a low interest period. it's harder to
Right.
qualify for loans right now. I'm seeing. What are your thoughts on just generally on real estate?
Yeah. Well, generally, I mean, it depends upon if you're being an investor or if you're buying a place for yourself. I usually say if you're buying a place for yourself, make sure you're buying it in at a time when you expect to live wherever you're living for at least 10 years, because there's business cycles that go up and down. And I know people that have been sort of famous economists, including Robert Reich at Berkeley, who bought at the top of the peak of the housing bubble. I don't know how these guys can claim they're economists after doing something like that, but he did. But so there's booms and busts, and you can almost get in serious trouble if you buy at the wrong time. You have to move or underwater after the 2008 crisis, and they couldn't move and take a job somewhere else because they'd have to come up with tens of thousands of dollars to pay off the mortgage because they were so underwater. So you only buy if it's for yourself when it's at a point where you know you're going to stay somewhere for 10 years, because if, over time the Fed will print and will bail you out that way. But there could be a short period of 3 years or so where you could be stuck. So don't buy unless you've got that long-term perspective on staying where you are. But the other thing is, right now, I think it's probably going to be a pretty good time to buy because interest rates are incredibly low. And I think coming out of the lockdown, it's going to be like a stutter step. People are going to be a little bit nervous about buying. So it could be a good time to buy for investment or for personal use. As a matter of fact, if during the lockdown you can find a house that's available, you might find someone that really needs cash, and you can help them out by negotiating hard, but getting something at a really, really good price. If someone needs cash right now and they've got a house to sell, that's the kind of person I want to talk to and buy a house from right now. But I think it's going to be a little shaky coming out of the lockdown, but at some point then it's just going to take off because there's just too much money in here. Everybody's going to realize at once that there aren't that many houses around, and there's a lot of money around, and it's going to go up, and interest rates will go up. So if you can buy at this level where interest rates are this low, at some point the mortgage is going to feel like you're paying $200 rent for a house. That's what it's going to feel like in 5 years, maybe 10 years.
Gotcha. Any thoughts on investment properties?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, investments a little bit. I would just make sure they're at least cash flow neutral. You don't have to be cash flow positive. Don't get into a situation where you're going cash flow negative. But if you're neutral, I don't really see a problem unless you're in an area where they might clamp on rent controls or something like that, because I think rents are really going to go much higher. So you've got to make sure you're not in a situation in an area where rent controls might come on, or you got to really get into complex thinking, saying, okay, if rent controls come on, I can sort of cut back on maintenance this way and that way, so my costs will go down and people aren't going to have anywhere else to go, so I can still make some money. But that's really, you're talking very sophisticated stuff there. But it's not impossible. But overall, the Fed is going to bail out the real estate market over time. There will be dips from time to time. And if you're an investor, if you can survive the dip, which means you're at least cash flow neutral and you can make your mortgage payments and all that kind of stuff, down the road you'll be okay. You got to be careful of price controls, but then be really smart and say, okay, I'm buying this now. If price controls come on, that means nobody else is going to be offering this, this, and this. I can cut this, this, and this, and still keep my cash flow going the way I want, and then you'll be fine.
Gotcha. You've been a very successful investor. Is there anything you can tell us? We know about the persistence and the networking, but can you describe what your mindset is on a daily basis beyond that?
I'm a thinker. I mean, I think all the time. I mean, I rarely listen to music. I don't watch much TV. There's maybe 2 shows I'm watching, and I think both series are ending this this spring or whatever. So
Can you tell us what they are?
yeah, I like How to Get Away with Murder. I mean, it's kind of a crazy show, and it takes you about 2 or 3 episodes to get into it. I don't know why I got into it, but it's really highly insane. But I love that one, and I like James Spade or whatever he's in. So Blacklist is the other one I watch. But that's it. I mean, I don't even know what else is on TV. But I think all the time. I think in the shower. I take long walks. And I think about everything. I really have my analytical process in my mind is pretty much on all the time.
Bob, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope that we can do this again.
Sure, it was a lot of fun. Very good questions, Mike.